Hello and welcome to this new series for Kerbal Space Program 2 for Science. So in this series we're going to make our way through the For Science update and try and explore the Kerbal system. So let's get straight into it. We'll start a brand new game by going to Start New Game. You can change the difficulty if you want to, but we're going to just leave it on normal for the time being. I'm going to quickly pop the name in. You can also change the agency name should you want, and the flag and agency colours, and I personally just like a nice simple white and black colour scheme, so I'm just going to quickly set the agency colours and now we can start the campaign.
Your new space program, leaping forward into the cosmos. Since the dawn of Kerbal kind, we have looked to the sky and wondered what sublime mysteries lie hidden in the darkness, like jewels never beheld. These untold treasures may soon reveal themselves due to the efforts recently founded Kerbal Space Program.
Oh my! I think that might have been the only copy of the orientation film. Hold on! Slides, somewhere. Welcome to your first day running the Kerbal Space Program. This campus hosts the greatest ever gathering of astronomers, astronauts, and engineers. After years of focused effort, this collection of geniuses has created several very impressive buildings. We believe we have all the necessary pieces to take our first steps off the ground. The best way to advance our technologies further is to get up there and learn by doing. All we need now is somebody to show us how to put all these parts together. Well, we also need somebody to help us out with the flying. We need a lot of help, actually. That's why you're here. My name is Paige, by the way. If you need any hints, feel free to visit me over at the training center. Everything in there is well padded, so it's a great place to get up and running. Welcome aboard!
So here we are at the Kerbal Space Centre. When you first start a brand new game, you will get all of these prompts from Paige, but for the purpose of these videos, I'm just going to skip straight through them. If you want to read them, feel free to do so at your own leisure. Now, if you've already played Kerbal Space Program 2, you'll recognise that we have the launch pad, the VAB, and the training centre, but we also have a couple of extra new buildings, including Mission Control and R&D. And the first place we want to go is to the Mission Control building. Now, when we're in the Mission Control building, it will give you all of the various different missions that that are available to you. And as you can see, we only have the one mission available at the minute, which is launching our first rocket. Now, when you click on it, you get this pop-up, and the main thing you need to read, or the only thing you really need to pay attention to, is the objectives part, which is telling us to launch a rocket to at least 10,000 kilometres. You can also hit the mission brief button, and that will bring up this little pop-up, which will give you more information. But as I say, you can read that in your own time, so I'm just going to quickly skip through all of these, and we'll get straight into it. So we'll hit the track mission button, and then we will go to the vehicle assembly building. So once again, when you go into any new building, you'll get all the pop-ups from Paige, which will just tell you what the various different elements of the HUD do. But we'll just skip through them, as I said before, and we'll get straight into the build. And it's a very simple build, is this one. All you literally need to do is create a basic rocket to get you to 10,000 metres. So we'll get the Mark 1 tin can. We will pop a stacked decoupler on the bottom, pop the Methalox fuel tank, the FL2 T200, and we'll throw the swivel engine on the bottom, and just so that we can actually make sure that we can land, we're going to pop the parachute on top. You can also, if you want to, go onto any of these tabs on the left hand side, which will show you the different sections for the various different parts. And as you research more parts, you'll get more of these tabs. But at the minute, I'm just going to throw 3 basic stabilizer wings or fins onto the side of the rocket as well. And if you want to increase the symmetry, you can press X on your keyboard, or you can press Shift X to reduce the symmetry, or you can also just click the symmetry mode button there. Yeah, that's our first rocket ready to be launched, so we'll go straight into the launch and get our first mission out of the way. So once again, now we're on the launch pad, we've got Paige telling us the various different elements of the HUD. Feel free to read them in your own time, obviously, but we're just going to go straight into the launch. So the first thing we'll do is we'll hit our stage button, which will start the countdown. You can skip the countdown by hitting the big green button on the bottom right, but I'm just going to let the countdown go down. And the first thing we're going to do, once we have taken off, is we're going to hit the up button on the SAS control wheel, just to make sure that the rocket is locked to the top of the nav ball, and that means that it's not going to end up flipping over and losing control, although this early in the game it probably won't actually make that much of a difference. But now we're out of fuel, you can see that our apoapsis is going to be well over 30,000 meters, so we're easily going to complete the available mission, as you can see. The other thing we can do while we're here is we can hit the experiments button on the vessel in what's that? Vessel actions bar on the left hand side of the screen, and that will give us a few science just for our initial crew observations while in atmosphere. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to jettison the engine and the fuel tank by staging our decoupler, and that just means that the parachute will actually be able to land us, because if we leave the engine and the fuel tank on, it'll be too heavy and the parachute will actually break during the descent, which obviously we don't want to happen, because we need to be able to get our Kerbal back to the ground safely. Now we're approaching our apoapsis, and once we start to descend again, we will then stage the parachute, which will we'll stage the parachute, which will deploy the parachute and mean that we'll actually be able to land. So we'll hit our stage button. As you can see, it's gone blue, but it hasn't actually staged yet, because we're not currently at the correct altitude. So once we hit the right altitude, the parachute will automatically stage, and then we will be able to land safely. So just to save a bit of time, I'm going to fast forward the time using the time warp bar on the bottom. You can either click on the arrow to do it manually, or you can use the full stop or comma buttons just to make sure that we actually get to speed up or slow down time. And as you can see, the parachute has now deployed, which means that all we need to do now is just wait until we land. So we'll let that happen, and then we'll get straight on to the next mission. So an easy way to cancel the time warp as well is to just hit the / button on your keyboard, and that will automatically set it to 1x speed. But yeah, now we've landed, you can see our active vessel is recoverable. We get another update from Paige, and what we're going to do while we're here, before we actually recover the vessel, is we're going to right click on the command pod, and we're going to run another crew observation, and that will give us an extra 4 science. And the other thing we'll do, just to get a little bit more science, is we're going to EVA our Kerbal, drop him onto the ground, and then if you right click on the Kerbal, you can actually run a surface survey, which I'm not sure if that'll do anything just yet. There's still a few bugs need to be done. This should actually give us a bit of science. So yeah, we've got 6 science from that. And the other thing we can do is we can run a crew observation, which I think is going to be the same as the crew observation we did while inside of the command module, but we'll just see if that does anything. Yeah, you can see it's saying that we've already got the experiment. So all we need to do now is reboard the command module, and then we can go onto the start menu and hit the recover vessel button. And that's our first successful mission. Now, to actually retrieve all of the science, because as you can see in the top right we currently have 32 science. But what we want to do is we want to go back to mission control, and you can see that the launch rocket mission now has a tick next to it and has turned blue. So what we want to do is we'll go into there and we will hit the submit button. Then you get this little bit of dialogue which will give you all of the quirky information. It doesn't really tell you much. You can hit the auto continue button, which will automatically continue the dialogue, or as I say, you can just hit the continue / over and out buttons. And there we have it, our first mission is complete. So now we have 57 science, but before we go into the R&D centre, you can also see we've got one new mission, which is launching out of the atmosphere. So once again, to get out of the atmosphere we need to launch to an altitude greater than 70 kilometers, so we'll track that. And then we will go to the R&D centre, and here, as you can see, we have all of the various different technologies that you can research. There are 4 different tiers. To get to the next tier you need to complete the top level, and then that will take you to the next tier. But for the time being we're going to go for light launchers and research that. Now what else do we have? We have aerodynamics, which will give us the small reaction wheel, which is always good to have. That will cost 10, so we'll grab that. We've got introductory construction, which the main thing that I would use out of that is the launch clamps. We also have probes, we have the environmental science, which we're going to grab that because that will give us the science junior, which will give us even more science, and we can also increase our solid rocket boosters, so we'll do that. And because we've still got 10 left, we can either save it for the next one, although at the moment I don't think it's that necessary, but I think what we'll do is we will go for the... let's go for the introductory construction for the time being. So now we're back in the vehicle assembly building. We want to build our next rocket for the next mission. So we'll start off with the tin can as usual, pop the parachute on top, and as you can see we now have a new tab on the left for science, which will give us the science junior, which we're going to pop on the bottom of the command module. Then obviously we want to add the decoupler, and as you remember with the first mission we used the FLT200, which only got us up to about 30,000 meters. So what we'll do is we're going to pop that on the bottom again. We're going to grab a swivel engine, and then we're going to add another decoupler, and we'll pop the FLT400 on the bottom of that and add another swivel engine, and that rocket will get us into a suborbital trajectory. Like I say, I'll pop a few fins on the bottom for stability, and just for the hell of it I'm also going to add some launch clamps. You don't strictly need the launch clamps at this moment, but it just makes sure that you're not going to end up accidentally falling over on the pad, which with a rocket like this it shouldn't be a problem. However, sometimes you do find that the rocket might fall over on the pad or be less stable on the initial launch, and then just to make sure it's not so tall I'm going to reduce the height as well. There we go. So before we go any further, because we now have a few different stages, we're going to need to also organise our staging stacks. So as you can see, when you mouse over any of the points on the staging stack, it highlights the parts on the rocket. So you can see stage 2 is the main engine, so we want to pull that down so that it matches, it's in the same stage as the launch clamps. We also want to make sure that the second engine is in the same stage as the decoupler on the top of the first stage, and then we'll just hit the minus button to get rid of those 2 stages, and now the rocket is ready to launch. So as you can see, we've got a new update from Page saying that we have more science, and that's because we have the Science Junior on board. So if we hit the Science button on the vessel actions bar, that will now give us 5 extra science for the environmental data from the Science Junior, as well as some science samples. And the reason we put the Science Junior on the bottom of the command module instead of on the top of the tank is because if we put it on the top of the tank, we can't actually retrieve the science yet. At some point in the future, I'm assuming you'll be able to EVA, right-click on it and retrieve the science, but that doesn't seem to be possible unless I'm missing something. So I like to just make sure it's stuck to the bottom of the command module so we can land all of them at the same time. And that way we'll definitely be able to recover what we've got. So now we're ready, we can stage and do a standard launch as we did before. And as I say, when we set off, we are going to hit up on the SAS command wheel, or SAS control wheel. And for this one, we're also going to roll the rocket so that the red north line on the nav ball is to the left. And the reason for that is we want to pitch the rocket this time so that we will land in the water instead of on the ground. And you'll see why in a moment. So now we are reaching about 25,000 metres. We're going to start carefully pitching the rocket over. We don't want to go too far outside of the green green prograde marker on the nav ball, because then air resistance can actually flip the rocket over and you'll lose control. As you saw, once the first stage was empty, we staged to the second stage. And we'll keep steadily pitching over. And now our apoapsis, or projected apoapsis, is over 70,000 metres, which will give us a nice suborbital trajectory. But because we're still in the atmosphere, it is dropping, so hopefully it won't drop below 70,000. And it looks like we should be okay because the rate at which we are slowing down seems to be slowing down. So while we're here, we might as well hit the science button on the left again, and that should give us an extra bit more science because we're now flying in the atmosphere. And once we reach 70,000 metres on the altitude bug, we will then hit that button again, and that will give us even more science. And there we are, we've reached space. So as I said, before we re-enter the atmosphere, we'll hit the experiment button. That'll give us even more science. We've got 30 science for each of those, which has given us a total of 104 science for this mission, which is good. But that's not all. We'll decouple jettison the fuel tank and engine, and we're also going to stage the parachutes, which will arm the parachute, as you can see by the blue parachute on the staging stack. And that just basically means that when we re-enter the atmosphere, the parachute will automatically deploy when we get to the correct altitude. So you can actually turn off the SAS entirely by pressing T on your keyboard, and I like to do that just because then the command module isn't fighting against the parachute basically, and it just means that we won't waste any battery, although at the moment it's not that much of a problem, but later on in the game, yeah, you will need to make sure that you're conserving battery at this point unless you have extra batteries on the command module. And there we have splashdown. And before we recover the vessel, once again we'll hit the experiment button. And you can see we've now got the new marker saying go outside because some experiments must be run by Kerbal on EVA. So while we're here, we'll pop outside. We'll try our crew observation, although that's saying it's invalid. We need to let go. So now we are in the sea, we can run a surface observation to grab a bit of water. And we might as well see if the crew observation will work. Although once again, I think it's probably going to be the same as the crew observation from when we were inside the command module. Yeah, there we go. So that's all the science we need to do. So all we need to do now is reboard the command module and we can recover the vessel. So as before, we'll go back to mission control. We'll click on the out of the atmosphere mission and hit submit. There we have it, an extra 50 science. So now the main difference you can see is we now have a secondary mission. And you can do multiple missions at once. So this is the buoyancy test, which basically means we need to splash down. And we are going to do a splashdown landing once we do orbit, once we orbit Kerbin, but that will be in the next video. So I hope you enjoyed this part 1 for the For Science series for Kerbal Space Program 2. If you did enjoy it, please feel free to like and subscribe, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.